Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're wrestling with a legislative reform of, well, truly monumental proportions.
That's putting it lightly.
India's complete overhaul of its labor law ecosystem. And this isn't just a simple update, right? This is taking 29 separate, often really archaic central laws and boiling them down into just 4 modern codes.
Exactly. And that fragmentation was always the core problem. The old system was just so complex, so time-consuming, and, a lot of people argued it was biased against businesses, creating these huge regulatory hurdles.
So the mission behind these 4 new codes, the Code on Wages, Industrial Relations, Social Security, and the OSHWC code, is really simplification.
Simplification and agility, yes. It's all designed to support the vision of up money or far it.
Which translates to self-reliant India for our listeners. So the goal is twofold. Strengthen worker protections, but also at the same time make India more competitive by improving the ease of doing business.
A delicate balancing act.
And we finally have a date. The government is aiming for these codes to be fully operational by November 21st, 2025. So our mission today is to really distill the immediate practical impact of all this.
For both sides of the coin, for businesses and for workers.
Absolutely. So where do we even begin?
We have to start with the biggest financial trigger point. It's in the Code on Wages, and it's the new single uniform definition of wages.
A single definition that applies across all 4 codes.
All 4. And this one change is forcing every single organization in the country to completely revisit its cost to company, its CTC structure.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why does just defining wages uniformly suddenly cost employers more money? It sounds so simple.
Well, it all comes down to a historic loophole that has now been firmly closed by what's called the 50% proviso.
The 50% proviso.
Right. So traditionally, employers would structure salaries to keep the basic pay component very, very low. Then they would load up the rest of the salary into all sorts of allowances.
Things like house rent allowance, conveyance, special allowances, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And since mandatory contributions, like your provident fund, your gratuity, were only pegged to that very low basic pay, the employer's overall liability was kept to a minimum.
A clever but now outdated strategy.
Precisely. The new code defines wages as basic pay, dearness allowance, and retaining allowance. But here's the game-changing part.
The proviso.
The proviso. It says that the components excluded from that definition, like HRA, conveyance, statutory bonuses, all of that cannot exceed 1/2 or 50% of the employee's total remuneration.
So what happens if a company's current structure has, say, 60 or 70% of the salary in those allowances?
That excess amount, so anything over that 50% cap, is legally deemed to be remuneration. It gets automatically pulled back into the statutory definition of wages.
Ah, I see. And because all the statutory contributions, like PF and ESEC, are now calculated on this much broader wage base.
Employers are suddenly facing immediate and, in many cases, substantial increases in what they have to contribute. It's a huge jump in their liability.
So this is not just tweaking a few numbers in a spreadsheet. This sounds like a massive operational overhaul.
It truly is. Every single business has to immediately audit and probably restructure every existing employment contract. And then there's the software.
The HRES and payroll systems?
Yes. These are often legacy systems, They have to be completely reconfigured to handle this 50% add-back calculation accurately, automatically, every single pay cycle. If they don't, they risk non-compliance from day one.
And the Code on Wages doesn't just stop at payroll, does it?
Yeah.
It also changes how employees are paid when they leave.
Oh, yes. The final settlement rule, this one is causing a lot of sleepless nights.
Go on.
The mandate is crystal clear. Final settlement amounts, whether it's from a resignation, a dismissal, a retrenchment, must be paid within just 2 working days.
2 working days.
2! Think about the logistics for a large company. That clock starts ticking the moment the employment ends.
That sounds almost impossible. I mean, given the complex sign-off process you usually see, asset recovery, no dues confirmations.
That's the source of the deep anxiety. Our sources show that 57 out of 101 surveyed organizations said flat out that this timeline is unfeasible.
So what's the workaround? Is there one?
Well, there isn't really a legal one. The only way is to completely automate the entire clearance process. Companies have to move away from those old manual paper-based systems. Otherwise, this is going to be a constant point of failure.
Okay, so a huge financial and procedural shift. Let's move from the money to the workflow. The Industrial Relations Code, or IRC, This seems to be where the government is really trying to deliver on that ease of doing business promise.
It is. And the most talked about change here is about thresholds for government approval.
Right.
Previously, any establishment with 100 or more workers needed prior government approval for things like layoffs, retrenchment, even factory closures.
Which could take months, I imagine.
It could. The IRC raises that critical number to 300 or more workers.
Wow. So that's a huge relief for a lot of mid-sized firms. It gives them real flexibility to adapt to economic changes without that long regulatory delay.
It's a genuine improvement for that whole 100 to 299 worker segment, which is so critical for manufacturing. And tied to that, the threshold for mandatory standing orders has also been raised,
From 100 to 300 as well.
also from 100 to 300 workers.
And just for clarity, standing orders are those really detailed, certified rule books for a company, right?
Yeah.
Everything from shift timings to disciplinary action.
Exactly. They are very complex to draft and get certified, so raising that barrier eases the administrative burden for hundreds, if not thousands, of smaller firms.
So that's the business side. What about the worker side? What does the IRC say about the right to strike?
The rules are much, much tighter now. There's a mandatory 14-day notice required for any strike or lockout, and that notice is only valid for 60 days.
Okay.
But here's a really interesting detail. The definition of a strike itself has been expanded.
So,
It now explicitly includes mass concerted casual leave taken by 50% or more of the workers,
so a coordinated sick-out is now officially a strike.
and has to follow the formal resolution process. It's not just a disciplinary issue anymore. And speaking of process, the whole enforcement model is changing.
Ah, from the Inspector Raj to something new.
Yes, they're moving away from the old inspector model to an inspector-cum-facilitator. The idea is to have them act more like advisors, emphasizing guidance and awareness rather than just handing out penalties.
And there's a way to resolve minor issues without going to court.
Yes, the provision for compounding of offenses. For certain first-time non-imprisonable violations, a business can essentially pay a penalty determined by the facilitator to settle the matter. It's meant to streamline compliance.
That emphasis on simplicity. It brings us to another key area, expanding the Social Security net.
This is probably the most progressive part of the whole reform, found in the Code on Social Security. The goal is universal coverage,
Universal meaning.
meaning it expands benefits like PF and ESIC to cover not just organized and unorganized workers, but also, critically, gig workers and platform workers.
That's huge for the digital economy.
It is. The ultimate aim is Aadhaar-linked portability, so your benefits move with you wherever you go for work.
But within this same code, there's a pretty big controversy brewing around the national floor wage, or NFW.
A very big controversy. This NFW is supposed to be the absolute minimum, the floor below which no state can set its minimum wage. It's meant to guarantee a basic standard of living.
So where's the problem?
The problem is the clash between economics and politics. Back in 2018, an expert committee, the Anup Satpathy Committee, did a very scientific, need-based study.
And they came up with a number.
They recommended an NFW of 375 rupees per day. That works out to about 9,750 rupees a month.
Okay, but the central government didn't accept that recommendation.
No, they didn't, citing various economic pressures. The current official reference figure is still way down at 178 rupees per day.
This is a massive gap, more than double.
It's an enormous gap, and it's created this massive uncertainty. States are waiting for the center to finalize the methodology, so this crucial piece of worker protection is just sort of hanging in the air.
The single most important part for social welfare, and it's stuck in ambiguity. Okay, beyond wages, what about working hours and gender equity?
The standard remains 8 hours a day, but there is new flexibility. 12-hour shifts are now allowed as long as the 48-hour weekly maximum is maintained.
And overtime.
Overtime must be paid at not less than twice the normal wage rate. No ambiguity there.
And for women in the workforce.
Big changes. Equal pay is mandated, and there are gender-neutral protections that explicitly include transgender workers. And critically, women can now work night shifts in all establishments.
But with conditions, I assume.
Strict conditions. First, their express consent must be obtained. And second, the employer has to provide mandatory documented safety measures and safeguards. It's a shift from prohibition to mandated protection.
Right. Let's turn to our final focus area, the Occupational Safety, Health, and Working Conditions Code, the OSHWC. This is vital for high-risk sectors like construction.
Absolutely. This one code consolidates 13 separate laws into one framework, and it introduces a revolutionary shift in liability.
A shift onto whom?
Onto the project professionals themselves. Architects, project engineers, designers,
Really? How so?
they are now legally required to consider safety and health aspects right from the planning and design stage of any construction project.
That is a massive shift upstream. So safety isn't just the site manager's problem anymore. It's baked into the blueprint from day one.
It's proactive safety management baked right into the system. And on general welfare, employers now have to provide separate washing and changing facilities for male, female, and transgender employees. Canteens are mandatory in any unit with 100 or more workers.
And the rules around contract labor, that's always a contentious issue.
The code tries to limit it. Contract labor is generally prohibited in an establishment's core activities.
But there are exceptions.
Of course. If the work is usually done by a contractor, if it doesn't need full-time workers, or if there's a sudden surge in work, this rule applies to any place employing 50 or more contract workers.
And lastly, what about protections for interstate migrant workers, a very vulnerable group?
The OSHWC code gives them some crucial protections. Mandatory medical checkups, for one. Accident reporting has to go to authorities in both the home state and the work state.
And anything else?
Yes, and this is a significant welfare measure. The employer has to pay a lump sum fare every year to cover the worker's journey to and from their native place.
This whole overhaul really is an immense balancing act, isn't it?
It is.
On one hand, you have this dramatic simplification for business raising that threshold to 300, the facilitator model.
And on the other, you have genuinely strengthened worker rights. That 50% wage floor, universal Social Security for gig workers, better protections for women and migrants. It's trying to achieve efficiency and equity at the same time.
So as we approach this November 2025 deadline, what's the main unresolved tension?
The ambiguity. It all rests on the final subordinate rules that haven't been published yet. The real impact hinges on the fine print, especially the exact calculation for that 50% rule, and of course the final number for the national floor wage.
And then there's the complexity of India's federal structure. That doesn't just go away.
Not at all. And this is so important for any company operating in multiple states. If there's a clash between a central code rule and a more beneficial state law.
The law most advantageous to the worker prevails.
Exactly. So despite this big push for uniformity, compliance still requires really granular state-by-state monitoring.
So the final provocative thought for our listeners is that the success of this reform isn't just about the central law. It's about the political will of individual states to finalize their rules and ensure this inspector-cum-facilitator actually enforces a need-based standard, not just administrative simplicity.
Which means if you're a business, you absolutely must be following the notifications coming out of your specific state governments right now. That's where the law that governs your operations will truly take shape.